So let me just make sure it has started. Can someone go over to YouTube and verify if it has started? So I'll just copy the link and drop it in the chat just to make sure. And I think we'll be doing it almost every time so that we can be sure that we are not running in vain. So yeah, so that's that. And then I think the streaming is okay. So you guys can check and give me feedback if you can.
Streaming is okay.
Streaming.
So you guys can check and give me feedback if you can.
Streaming is okay. So you guys can check. Okay, thank you. So you can turn it off now. You can turn off the stream so that we'll be able to.
I have.
Okay, because I'm getting some kind of feedback. Okay, so I think I would really have to abide on the idea of, you know, the cascade, specificity, and inheritance, and it is very important. So let me just start a fresh HTML boilerplate, and this will be it. Yeah, so, and I'll create just one element, and it's going to be an H1, and I'm going to say okay, let's just say hello world, and I'll save it. Yeah, then what we'll do is just let's open this with live server, and when live server opens this, I'll just drag that over to this place. Yeah, so I'll reduce this from both sides here and bring it over to the server side, and then I'll just expand it a little bit more. Yeah, let me expand this one as well. And what I'm going to be doing is very simple, and I think I just actually need to, you know, create another file called styles.css. Yeah, so let us go on to link our CSS with our HTML. So I'm going to do link, and then we'll do href, of course, then styles. Then we are going to do rel, yeah, and the relationship is like this, a style sheet. And then yeah, we close this. So when I save it, nothing serious should happen on the page. So now we have one element, which is the H1, and that's the only element on our page. Yeah, that's like the only singular element on our page. And then the idea is, first of all, I'm going to set something on the body, and this is the body element. Yeah, so on the body element, I am going to set a color of red, and you know, color actually targets fonts. Basically, it doesn't target anything, it only targets fonts. And you can see that in as much as I said, I'm using the tag name selector for body, not the H1 selector. You know, I didn't call H1, I called body. And then now our H1 has a color of red. And why is that happening? It is because of, sorry, it is because of, this is because of inheritance. So what that means is that the H1 is inheriting this color from its parent, and that is the body tag. So automatically this applies a color of red to every element that actually has text content, as long as they are inside the body tag, whether it is a paragraph or even the paragraph is in a div, and you know, whatever it is. So if I create a div and then I put a paragraph in the div and I generate some dummy text, you know, and I save it, you know, you see the paragraph is still having a red color. And the reason why this is happening, I remember the paragraph is not even a direct child of the body tag. The paragraph is like a grandchild, because the direct child of the body tag is the H1 and the div. Yeah, and then the child and the paragraph tag is actually more like a grandchild to the body tag, but it inherited the color property. And you see that now. So it inherited this property. And you guys can turn on a video. Let me turn on my video as well. At least let me be seen, even if it is 1 or 2 people. Yeah. So the paragraph and the heading tag actually inherited this color from the body tag. And if I now go on to specify for my H1 a color of green, yeah, and when I do this, the color eventually will become green. And the reason why it is green is because the color I set to the H1 tag is more specific to the H1 tags, and not, you know, the more generic one that is on the body tag will be overwritten by the more specific one, by the what? h1 selector tag. Do you guys get that? So what you see here is that this style will be inherited by every element. For instance, like the color property is not valid until you have text. So for everything that property is valid for, that style will be inherited unless we override it by specifying a more specific tag. So the way CSS actually knows which style to use, is through the cascade. It is the cascade that determines which style will now be applied eventually, because this style could have been applied on our h1, but it is not applied. And this one also is possible to be is also targeting our h1 element. And now eventually we see that we have a color of green, and it doesn't matter where you write CSS. If you use this same rule, like a more general one then a more specific one, the cascade automatically knows how to manage and handle that. Do you guys understand what I'm talking about? So the cascade the cascade is just like, I don't want to say brain box, because I don't know how car brain boxes work, but let's just say it is the brain box of CSS. It knows which selector to actually to choose to prioritize over the others because of the law of selector precedence. And as you can see here, the body tag is the most generic in this context, and the h1 selector is the least generic one and the most specific one. This one is the most generic one and the least specific one. This is the least generic one and the most specific one. Then we can now take it a step further by adding a class class attribute to this and call it top header. Yeah, and we save that. And when we say top header, and I'm just going to get rid of this so that we don't have any extra confusion, so, but let me just leave the inheritance on the body tag. That's intentional, but let me remove the div and the paragraph because we don't need that, so that we don't so now this red color is not being used. Yeah, then now we go on to pick that top heading class, and top heading class will have a color of yellow, and guess what the color is going to be? The color is going, what's that?
Top header, sir.
It's top header, not top heading, sir.
Because I was slightly surprised. Okay, yeah. And the color is supposed to be what? Yellow. Because now we are becoming more specific, because in this case, if we have another h1 tag and we call it bottom, just to be consistent with the naming, you can see that the bottom header still has the more generic class name, the more generic color, while the top header has a more specific one, because all the h1 elements on the page will have this color. All the h1 elements is supposed to have this color. This rule set is for all of the h1 elements on the page. Yeah, while this rule set is for all the elements that have this top header class. So as long as an element is an h1 element, it qualifies to have this rule set. But this one is the scope of this top header class name is narrower, because not all of our elements eventually we have this, and even if all of our elements have it, it is still narrower, because now it is not as generic as long as the class and the tag name is h1, then this color will be applied. So now in this case, it will first look for the tag type actually. Then if it is h1, it looks to apply this color. Then it looks further to see if this other one is applied, and it's more like we are giving more and more description, more specific description. It's just more like when they say okay, we know, like, to say to use the word female is a gender, or to use the word male is a gender. So when you say female or male, and you say call all the male students, you are talking about every male student. It is a general announcement. As long as you are a male student, whether you are in SS1, GSS1, GSS2, year 1, year 2, year 3, it doesn't matter where you are, you qualify. So that is a generic, it is very general. Now, when you now say, call all the GSS1 male students, that is more specific. You get the point? Now, even when you now say, okay, GSS1 male student, you now decide, okay, let us narrow it down. Call all the Yoruba GSS1 male students. Do you get the point? Or the GSS1 male students that are Yoruba. It's more like the idea of set. So we have the universal set, then we have more specific set. We also have we have intersections, and we have union and so on. But in this case, just think about the idea of you having, the universal selector, just like the word suggests, like as though you have a universal set. Everything qualifies to be in that set. Then the H1 is a subset of the universal set. This one is a subset of the universal set. But the H1 is more like a more generic subset compared to the top header. I don't forget my point, using the idea of male student, Yoruba male student, GSS1 male student, and so on. Is it clear enough, Triumph? I see you shaking your head. It is not?
Yes, sir.
Is it clear?
No, sir, it's not clear. It's not clear.
Okay, which part is not clear?
Starting from the inheritance, I don't want to take you back. But
No, it's
starting
fine.
from inheritance, like, okay, I'm seeing inheritance there, like inside the body tag.
Okay,
I wonder why I'm not seeing red.
This is a comment. It's a comment. Do you get it?
Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing red. Why am I not seeing red at all?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, the more specific, for instance, the color is not background color. I didn't say background color. If I had said background color, you get, it would have been the background color. Color is the text color, not the background color. You get it? And because the body does not necessarily contain any text per se, so you can't expect, I don't know if you get my point. So you can't expect that anything will happen. So what this color will be looking for is if there's any child inside of the body tag. And in this case, the child we have in the body tag is just this first H1 and this second H1. So if there's any child in the body tag that qualifies to receive this property, then it will inherit it from the body tag, provided that you have not set that same property using a more specific selector. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Does it make sense? Don't laugh.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the idea of inheritance.
It does.
Okay.
No.
Okay, that's the idea of inheritance.
Okay.
So you can set a property on, a parent element that you want the children to inherit. Then, because you know that, okay, for instance, if you want to have 10 H1 inside of the body tag now, and you know that there are some colors or certain things that will be similar to all of them, then you can do something like this. Maybe the color will be similar in many ways. Then you can do this so that the majority of them will inherit this. Then if you now want to set a more specific style for a particular one, then you can now go on to set a more specific one using a more specific selector. So the cascade is actually what manages this, because as you can see now, we have 3 valid properties that our H1 can actually use in the DOM. And when I remove this one, automatically the color of both H1 will be green. And when I remove this one, the color of the H1 is going to be red. And you can see that, all of these properties, actually qualify to be passed on to our H1. But the cascade is the reason why we don't have conflict, because imagine that at the same time, your elements will be red, green, and yellow at the same time. Just think about that. Is it going to mix it up and create a new color out of them? So you have to know which one. There has to be one color that will make it to the browser eventually. Do you get the point? So the cascade is actually what manages that, which color we get to the browser. And you have to know how the cascade does that for you to be able to write CSS very well. Do you get it? Because if you don't know how the cascade thinks, you will be writing erroneous code from time to time. You will be seeing things happen on the screen and you will not be sure why that is happening. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and that's why I'm emphasizing on the cascade, because we've just written 9 lines. I've written CSS to the point of writing up to 1,000 lines in one file, and there are many other CSS files. And don't think about it as if it's a big thing. Eventually, when you start working on projects, you see that before you know it, you're already on the line 100, line 200. You're writing different CSS rules, and eventually there will be a conflict. So when you understand how the cascade works, you can know where to look at, and you know why there's a problem as such. You get the point? Hello.
Yes, sir.
So now we've been able to cover the idea of
Yes, sir.
inheritance. we've been able to cover the idea of specificity, which is what this class name is actually doing now, because the class name is actually the most specific. So, like I said before, the Cascade uses the idea, the concept of specificity and inheritance to know which rule set to apply. I said that right? So using the idea of specificity and inheritance to know which rule set to apply. And then there's another core aspect of CSS, which I'm going to show you now. And let me just remove this second CSS, this second header tag. So, and let's just have one. So let's have the yellow one. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do this to this. And when I do this, you can see that in as much as the so in as much as the top header, class selector is more specific to the element, yet eventually our text still remains green, and that is because we've overridden the default thinking of the Cascade to force this particular property on our H1 element using this important flag. So that is, we are changing the order of importance now. That is, a more specific tag will be overridden. A more specific selector is now being overridden by a more generic one just by using this important flag. And you have to be careful when you are using this important flag, because imagine when you say important in several ways and you are targeting the same selector. Imagine that you've already done this, and you will run into this most of the times when you are working with things like frameworks, like external CSS frameworks. Sometimes some styling might come from the framework that you need to override. Then you might need to use the important flag, but you have to use the important flag very sparingly. You don't use it anyhow, because when you use it anyhow, you might end up having it all over the place. And as a matter of fact, the reason why you will be having to use important every time is because you don't really understand how the Cascade works. Because if you understand how the Cascade works, you don't have to use inheritance from time to time, like almost every time, virtually every time. Everything important. Most important person. It shouldn't be like that. So you have to understand how the Cascade works. And I'm emphasizing on this because over time you will run into situations where you apply styles and you just have to think about the Cascade, and you'll be able to quickly debug what is happening. And I'm going to bring back all of these stuffs, and then I will go to our developer tool in the browser, and you'll actually see what is happening here. You will see what is happening with the Cascade, and then I will just select that H1 element. So this is the H1 element. We don't have anything written, any other thing. So you can see that this one is actually being cancelled out in as much as it is more specific. And this cancelling it out is the same equivalent of actually commenting it out. It's like you've actually commented out this particular line. That's what it means. It's like you did this. That's what it means. So the browser is commenting out every particular code that is targeting a particular selector but has a lower precedence compared to the one that the browser has chosen. So the browser will just comment it out eventually. So let's just leave this way. So when I come here and remove this, you will see that this one gets applied. And when I remove this, you know what is going to happen? If I uncheck this particular one, remember that there are 3 different color properties we are passing down. One from the body, one from the class the tag name selector, then one from the class name selector. Then if I remove this, it will have to fall back to inheritance. Do you get the point?
That's right.
Yeah, and when you look at here, you see that they wrote inherited from body, this color of red. And when I also remove that, it will go back to the default black. So you can see that we are seeing the inherited property. It actually tells you that this is inherited. Do you get? But for this one, this is the default, setup for the HTML, H1 tag, or like display block font size 12. This is like the default. So we can't even comment out any of this. The only way we can comment it out is by setting it, by in our code by ourselves, and that's that about that. So if I bring back this, it will become green. When I bring back this, it becomes red. So just like that. So you can see that now the body is being stroked out. The color will pass from the body. So there's no inheritance coming in from the body. So if I go back to the body and set in another property like text align, and I say center, it will inherit that from the body as well. And you can see that it is now centralized in the middle of our page. And you can see that that text align is inherited from our body. So that's inheritance basically. You don't have to pass it to an element. You just pass it to the parent and the children will inherit it. Except if you now specify to the children specifically that they shouldn't inherit it. And that the way you do that is by giving them that same property. But until, and you know, this the cascade will only override the property that is common between two selectors for the same element. If the selector, if the property is not, the CSS property is not common to both selectors, it will not, you know, it won't select them. It won't override it. It will just apply both of them. Like now, I see that we are having text align here, but we are not setting text align on any other selector. So it doesn't override it. It just inherits it from the body. Do you guys understand that? Eh?
I understand.
Okay. So you understand what the cascade is. Now the cascade, just think about the cascade like the manager. And I believe that if the cascade was to have an interview with me right now and I asked the cascade, how do you do the things you do? You know, what I've explained so far is what it's probably going to explain to you. Okay, what I do is I just look at the selectors and I look at the precedence of the selector, and based on the precedence of the selector, I just kind of, you know, figure out which one to apply to a particular element. And say that, wow, Cascade, you are so cool, you know, you do these things in such a cool way. And the Cascade is going to be like, no, I'm just designed to work like that. So, okay. So for us to work together, now I have to understand how you follow this rule set. Yeah, that's what the Cascade will tell you. For you to work with the Cascade will have to, you know, teach you the rule set and how it follows them. Then you now start, you know, behaving as though, you know, you are a cool CSS, you know, person. And meanwhile, all you just understand is how the Cascade works. Does that make sense to you? And I know as you write CSS eventually, you will remember this day or remember the Cascade. And you begin to appreciate the fact that you actually have an understanding of the Cascade, because without the Cascade, you just have to keep, you know, messing up your CSS code and keep applying the same thing to different, you know, different elements and, you know, those kind of complications and so on. So that's that about the Cascade. So I think at this point in time, if there's no question, let's just go into what we have to do for today. So is there a question at this point in time or no question so far from you guys?
No, sir.
No question. Okay.
No.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to delete this because this is not the kind of code I want to share now. There's nothing in it. Or you want the code? That's a worthless code. So what we'll do now is, you know, we go over into what we have to do today. So I'll just keep the boilerplate because we'll need to use it. So first of all, you know, I've been dealing with the subject of, I've been talking about the subject of colors, like very briefly. And hold on, guys. And then you've been seeing me do things like, you know, RGBA. Sometimes I type the color keyword. Sometimes I use, what's it called? I use the HSL. Sometimes I use RGBA. Sometimes I use color. I don't use HSL. Sometimes I use it yesterday because from the style guide, and that's what it's recommended that we use. So I'm just going to talk about those colors, and you know, at the moment, and let's know how these colors work, and just like that. So first of all, what we are going to learn first is, you know, we bring back our H1 element, and then we are just going to write hello world like we did before. And then we are going to just save that, and it's going to come back to our screen now. And then we pick that H1 element, and then we target a color, and we just use the red keyword, which is valid. You know, that's a valid CSS color. And you see that, you know, you know, and then you see that the color property just gets, you know, applied to the element. And it is important for you to understand that in CSS1, there were only 16 main color keywords, and you are very limited. And at the moment, I think we have about 145 color keywords, which you might not want to memorize all of them. For instance, like the way you know some colors might not be the way CSS will apply them, or the way you want them. For instance, if you want purple, for instance, CSS, I think with CSS will call it violet or indigo or something like that. Then you might want a particular shade. But when you are using the color keyword, you are limited. Do you get the point? You are very limited using this color keyword. And that's why there's another way of writing colors, because here you can actually write green. You can write green. You can write, when I save it, you see that the color becomes green. Sorry. Yeah. And when I change this to yellow, the color becomes yellow, because CSS by default actually knows these colors. And currently, I think there are about 145 color keywords that you can use in CSS. But that particular color keyword that might not be the exact color you want to apply. It might be a particular shade of yellow that CSS keyword does not cover, that the CSS keywords don't necessarily cover. Do you get the point? And that's why we have another way of writing colors, which is what? The X code. You use hexadecimal codes to write your color. And the word hexa is actually the word hexa in the normal sense, which stands for 6. If you did, like when we did them, it is shapes, or what's it called in mathematics. When you have polygon, hexagon, and so on, depending on the number of sides. So the word hexa is actually the word, I'll write it's the word 6. And the reason why we call this hexadecimal codes is because what are decimal numbers? Decimal numbers are actually numbers from 0 to 9. Yeah. Does that make sense to you guys? So these are decimal numbers. So hexadecimal numbers actually target the first 6 alphabets, which is A to F. Yeah. And combining them with 0 to 9. And that's why when you see me do things like star, AE 2299, that's a valid color. I don't have to know that from top of my head, but I know that's a valid color because the characters are valid. But when I do something like AZ, it will not be valid. You see, it is invalid because it is not containing the hexadecimal keyword. And I'm just going to write a list of the hexadecimal keywords here. Hexadecimal characters, rather, not keyword. So hexadecimal characters go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Sorry, 9. Then we now have what's it called? A, B, C, D, E, F. And then if a number does not fit into, a character does not fit into this, you cannot use it here. And that's why even if I use G, it will not work because it is hexadecimal. But when I use F, it is now valid. Do you get the point? So that's how you combine this kind of colors, these hexadecimal colors. And you have to know that, and there's a way you derive, the colors from all of this. But just know that, this is how this color kind of, writing colors in CSS actually came up to be. So if you want to write something in the red zone, you might end up doing things like EE, and you can actually mix up these colors, and you can see that this is in the red zone because from 40, I think 4 actually denotes red based on that. So this actually, what it does basically is it actually combines the 3 primary color, red, green, and blue. So the primary colors, and CSS actually thinks about color the same way we think about color as humans, green and blue. So the X code is actually a mix of these 3, and then you can now add maybe alpha characters, which is more like transparency and so on. But some might be, you can see that we now have some transparency applied to this, but it is not always good to use X code with transparency. So that brings us into the next type of next method of writing colors in CSS. So the other way of writing color in CSS, so this is you writing color as an X code. You guys understand what I've said so far, please?
No, sir.
Okay, so which
Yes, I do.
okay, which part is unclear, please?
It still look like algebra.
Okay, the idea, but you understand what I mean by, these are decimal numbers. That you understand that, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and the hexa is actually targeting the characters in the alphabet. So hexa actually is A to F, the first alphabet to the 6th alphabet, because the word hexa actually means 6. Do you get the point? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So when you are, sometimes you might want to, you don't have to know this hexadecimal codes. You don't have to know them, because there are even tools online where you can find tools online where you just say X code generator for CSS. When you type it, you actually see tools online that helps you, mix these colors together. You don't have to know how to combine mix red. You are not a you're not a fine art teacher. You're not you are not what's it called? Is it Da Vinci or so? So you're not supposed to be painting it by yourself, like looking for. So what you can do is you can just easily mix up these colors, and you can see that the X code here will update. You get the point? So there are tools online to actually help you arrive at a particular X code, character. Combination. So for you to be able to arrive at a particular color, you can still move it down this axis and pick any of the color. You can see that the colors are actually changing. So you can see what I'm talking about. So you don't have to know how to combine the colors. I'm just telling you how, for you to know what a valid X number is. So for instance, if I write something like this, BY, it is not valid because it is not contained in this X code character we are using. I don't know if you get my point. It is
Yes,
not
sir.
contained here. So the valid X code is 0 to 9 and A to F. So when I do BF, we'll actually arrive at the column. I don't necessarily have to know how that is mixed, honestly. It is irrational for me to actually, want to go and learn how to mix X code, but you can actually understand the fundamental principles behind them, because their range is actually, so when you do like 1 1 1 1 1, 1 is actually closer to the, because it ranges from I think is it 0 to 255, 0 to 255, but thereabout. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm not an X code expert, but you don't have to understand, but just know that 0 0 0 0 is black. Yeah, 0 0 0 is black, and F F F F is white. And here's another important thing you should know. Like if the colors, if the characters are the same, because there are 6 characters actually, 1 2 3 4 5 6, but you put this hashtag in front of them. So if the 6 characters for the X code are the same, you can actually use a shorthand property to put just 3, and it will still be valid. So FFF or 6Fs is valid for white, and 3 zeros or 6 zeros is valid for black. You get that? Then the same goes with any EEE or whatever. So if it is the same for all 6 characters, you can actually write 3 and it will still be valid. So this will be a kind of gray color or something. So this is gray. Then we also have CCCCC. It's also and you can actually play around it, but you don't have to you don't have to stick to know. You don't have to want to know how the X codes are generated, but you can try to find out at your own time. I don't find out at my own time. I just use a color generator to generate the colors. Or what another thing I do is I just go here, over on top of the color, and then pick any color I want. But whenever you are using a color without transparency, it is important for you to know that this is more preferable. Using X codes are more preferable because it is kind of neater and easier. It is easier to read, and it's also important to note that this is not case sensitive. You can use lowercase letters and you can use uppercase letters for the X code. Yeah, so that is that about using X code. So I said the first one is using so let me just create a comment. The first one is using what? The color keyword to create your color in CSS, the color keyword. And the second one is using the X code, which is what I explained up there. Then the third one is using a combination of red, the primary colors, which is the Rgb syntax. Yeah, and the Rgb syntax works alongside your works together in case you need it with the RGBA syntax. And what this means, this is an alpha channel, but let me just go over the RGB in a bit. So the RGB works like this. You're actually going to use this function RGB, then you open a parenthesis, then the colors are grouped into 3 particular sections separated by a comma, and then the first color I believe is the red. Yeah, the first color is the red. So and it ranges from 0 to 255. So let's say our red. So if we do 255, which is the last color in that index, then we also have 255, and then we have 200. That's a valid color, and it's kind of like a light yellow, because if we do 255, it's actually going to be pure white. So this ranges from 0, it ranges from 0 to 255. So you can see now we're having this kind of Nigerian light green, so Nigerian jersey green. So I can also change this to 0, and when I change to 0000, guess what? It is going to become what? Black. You get the point. So this is the Rgb syntax for colors, and most times when you use this color picker to pick the color, it is going to give you this Rgb syntax. It's not going to give you the Xcode syntax. So you can see that here we have 43 red, 43 our red, the number for our red is 43, our green is 1, and our blue is 1. So if I change this to 0, it also changes to a different color, but it's just like mixing up the colors, So that's it. So when you have 0 red, 0 blue, 0 green, automatically becomes black. And when you have all red, like full red, full full this, and full green and full blue, it becomes white automatically. Okay, so that's pure white, and it is at this extreme end. Yeah, then the next one is the Rgba syntax, which is this one I talked about. So that one, you just need to add a to this function here. Then here you might need to put a comma, and then add the opacity, which is the transparency. So this creates an alpha channel, more like you having your color blend with a background. So you use this maybe like when you want to have an image in your background, then you want to maybe like a painted color on the surface. So you can use sometimes you can use the transparency, the alpha channel, to add transparency to the color you're adding. And you can see that transparency here, because here you can actually see that the transparency changes. It goes from 0 to 1 actually. So this is 0 transparency, and this is 2. And once it's 1, it changes automatically to RGB, no longer RGBA. So does that make sense for you guys? Hello?
Yes, it does.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's that, because I'm sure that when you see me, sometimes I write color red, sometimes I will use Xcode, sometimes I use RGB or RGB. So you kind of understand where all of that is coming from, and they are all valid. But what I will not recommend you using every time is the color keyword, because the color keywords are very limited, except if the exact color you want to use there is a provisioning for it amongst all the array of CSS keywords. And I believe that you guys actually write notes when we are in these classes. It's very important sometimes for you to just take notes, so that you're not caught in the loop of having to go and watch an entire video or something like that. But it's fine. So that's that about this. Then there's another syntax called HSL, and I talked about this yesterday. So this is basically we have so let me just add that here. So we have so this is 3, not 2. I still wrote 2, so this is 3. So we have HSL, and we have HSLA. And the difference between HSL and HSLA is actually the way they are, the coordinates that they travel. There's actually like a geometry around these colors, because for the RGB they actually use a cubic coordinate, but for the HSL they use a cylindrical coordinate. Yeah, the RGB is a cubic coordinate, and let me just show you what I mean by that, so that it doesn't start sounding like something else. So I will just tell you, because this is how you actually visualize the color for the cylindrical and the cubic coordinate, and you don't have to keep those words in mind. Basically, it's just for you to visualize what is happening within the context of what we are talking about. So let me just show you this. So the cubic coordinate implies that your color is like a 3-dimensional plane, having width, height, and a breadth, and then at the base is blue, traveling from this direction to this direction, then the red travels towards here, and the green travels towards the peak of the cube, while the cylindrical coordinate actually travels to around a cylinder, and that's what HSL uses. This is RGB and this is HSL, but you don't have to keep that in mind, like I said initially. So it's just for you to visualize it. So yeah, So for HSL, this is how HSL works. HSL actually, combines your hue, saturation, and then your lightness. So I'll just use HSL. So HSL, the first parameter in HSL, which is the first number here, and let me remove this last one because it's turning into HSL. So the first one is talking about the actual color. It's now talking about what amount of that color do you want. You get. Then the second color is, this one is talking about the color you want. This is talking about what color do you want. Then this one is talking about what percentage of that color do you want. So let's say 90%, for instance. Then the third one is talking about how light do you want the color to be. So let's say 10%. So now we have a reddish color, basically something almost close to red. So then we have, is it red? Then we want to choose, let's say 100%, and then here let's say 0%, and let's see what that looks like. So this is total black. So that means we are choosing red, but we are saying 10% of red. So when we change this to 100%, it goes towards white. So there's a way this whole thing is actually being mixed up, but just know that the 40 zone is the red zone. So each color actually has its own zoning. So when you do within the 20 zone, there's another color you're actually calling for. So let me just change this to 50 because so that everything doesn't blow out of proportion. So I think let's just experiment a little bit, but you don't have to mix all of these colors by yourself. So I think from 0 to 40 is red, basically. So this second color is talking about what amount of red you want. So if we say 10% of red, so we'll have 10% of red. So we have more like a lesser, like a faint amount of red. But you can see across this particular color picker, bar, you can see that our color is actually in the red zone. So I think 0 to 40 is red. Then maybe anything above 40 should be a different shade entirely. Maybe it might still be in the red zone, but I don't know. So you don't have to I think this is somewhat in the yellow zone. So when we change this to 100%, I think we should get a yellow. So yeah, this is a yellow. So that means the 50, probably 50 to 100 could be yellow. So let's try 100. So that's just HSL. HSL is kind of easier to write compared to RGB, because here you just know that your color ranges from 0 to 255. Yeah, and that means so it ranges from red to blue to green. Yeah, sorry, from red to red. So it's just like a mix of red and these colors on this right side here, I believe. Yeah, from red, yellow, there are shades of yellow, then we have blue, then I don't think we have green, so I think it's red, yellow, and blue or something like that, but I'm not exactly sure. So you just don't have to keep all of these things in mind. Just know that it works, and when you get to use it. So HSL is, I think, it's easier because here you can choose the amount of greenness you want on your, what's it called, or the amount of redness you want. So let's just go back to the red zone, which is the 0 to 40. So now our red zone 0 to 40. Okay, so 0 to 40. So let's pick 30. Yeah, so okay, drifting away from that. So let's just stay within the red zone. So here is talking about the amount of red you want. So, and that will determine how far this will drift from red. Yeah. So if we do 0, I think 0 should be plain red, like deep red. So it is far to this end. So it travels from here to here actually. So that's the idea. It travels from that, from this 0 zone to, and you can see that as I go, the color here actually changes. The color here changes as I, go down that vertical bar. You can see that the color is increasing. When we get to this place, we go back to red. Then, I think HSA actually goes up to, is it 320? Okay. Oh, I see. HSL goes up to 360 or something like that. Yeah, it goes up to 360. And remember from the slide I showed you, it's actually traveling around the cylinder. Do you understand? So this is the degree at which it is traveling. It is going from 0. It starts out at red, then go all the way to 360. You get the point? Yes.
Yes.
Does that make sense for you guys, please?
Yes.
Okay, so basically it ranges from 0 to 360. So basically what I would just use, so let's just go back to 0. So when you visualize that cone again, you start out at red and then you go over to, and I'm just going to bring that here. Let me just take a screenshot of it, not having to open it anymore. So the idea is that it is going around this axis, going around the cone. It's going to take a full 360-degree turn, and that's why when it's HSL, when we get back to the bottom of this, it is going to go back to our red. Do you get the point? And then this is the degree of redness we want. So if we say 10, that means it will not be as red as it should be. So it will drift away from the red. If we say we want 50% redness, then it is going to, drift a little bit inwards towards, the actual red color. Then here is the degree between total black and total white. So if we go here, it is going to be utterly black, and when we go to 100%, it is going to be utterly totally white. So this is the lightness. It's either entirely black or entirely white. Get the point? That is the stored, value. So that is hue. The hue is the color. Then the saturation is the intensity of the color. It ranges from 0 to 100%. Then the third one is the lightness of the color. So that's, I think that's like the third kind of color. And I think HSL is actually becoming a thing. Like almost everybody's using HSL these days. I don't know why exactly. So, and then the second, the last parameter for HSL, which is the alpha channel. You can also add an alpha channel, which is the transparency of the color itself. So we can do 0.1. So that's going to make it have 10% transparency, and to travel along this particular axis. So that's that about HSL. So I think that should be it. So for HSL, so there are other colors which I think I'm not going to be talking about now. Other ways of you selecting colors, which I won't be talking about. So we have HWB, we have LCB, we have lab, we have I think we have lab. So I think there are about 6 known color creation patterns in CSS. But I think for you to understand the color, the keyword syntax, the Xcode, RGB, and HSL is actually, I think, is more than enough. And most of the times you'll be using the color keywords or the Xcodes. Then on rare occasions you might have to be using the RGB because of the alpha channel, not necessarily because of this. And then you might have to just maybe have to hover on top of a color with RGB, then pick the color you want, depending on how you want to select the color. So that's fine for the colors. So the next thing I want to show you guys is since we've been doing CSS, so I think it is important at this point that we look at some very important CSS properties and how those properties are being applied to certain elements. So I'm just going to go over to my H1, and I'm going to create a div under the H1.
Can I ask a question?
Okay, please, you can.
Sorry, the HSL seems like RGBA.
Yeah.
Like when you hovered over it, it was like it showed RGBA.
It doesn't show RGBA. It actually shows HSL, but it shows you HSL. It shows you HSL. The HSL picker.
No, I mean on the color. See on the color stuff now. Look at on the color. It's HSL you wrote.
And
no doubt. For the color.
It's because now I'm using HSLA. But if I use plain HSL, it's supposed to just give me the HSL selector. But somehow that can be very inconsistent. But
okay.
Yeah, but most times when you convert, especially in VS Code, when you hover, this is a VS Code thing in particular. When you hover on top of the color, it kind of just converts the color to RGB for you.
Okay. Then the last question I want to ask
So I think this is because we are writing RGB. So if we change this back to 10%, and then change this back to 50%, which is like halfway between white and black. When I hover on top, it should not necessarily. I don't think it should. Okay, HSL rather. So HSL. When I do this, I think it should give me HSL. It shouldn't change it to RGB because I'm not writing the correct RGB syntax. For RGB, I don't use percentage. So once it sees percentage, it knows that I'm using HSL, not RGB. Do you get?
Okay, so which one is your opacity then among those three?
Among
which one is
the opacity is not here yet. The opacity will be added when you add the third parameter, which is the alpha channel. So when I do 0.1, that's when the opacity comes alive.
Okay, and then it will not see change to RGB.
Yeah, because now you're talking about an alpha channel now, so it just change.
Yes. Then there's another question I want to ask. Just please, pardon me, guys. What determines when you use each, or is it just at your discretion?
Yeah, at your discretion. You don't have to. You must not use anyone. It's just which one you. Like I said, I use Xcode most of the times, then RGB most of the times. Yes.
Okay. And since some of them have limitations, like that color that you said that we should not use.
Yeah, the color keyword is like I think Xcode has its own limitations. You cannot actually call it limitation because with Xcode syntax you can actually add an alpha channel as well, and then there's just that it's more difficult to write and put transparency on an Xcode syntax. For instance, if I say something like 440 EECC, something like this, I can add an alpha channel like maybe A1, and I don't know if this is really a valid one, but you can see that it adds transparency for me by itself. You can see it has added transparency for me by adding 2 additional characters in front of my Xcode. And you can see that Visual Studio Code is actually warning me, and what it is saying is I think it will give me an error, but I can't actually see the error, but it is actually giving me a warning, with this yellow line under the character, because I shouldn't have to do this when I can easily use RGB to set my alpha channel and so on. You get the point?
Yeah, I do, sir.
Okay.
I do, sir.
Do you have any question again? Any other question?
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay. I'm with you.
Okay, so this A that we have in RGBA and HSL, what does the A represent?
Yeah, that's what
I noticed that it's in decimal places, 0.1 or something. Is that the value for it?
It is, yeah. Let me just bring RGB. And let's say we do 255, 255, 255. And then when we do this, the A will now be the last parameter, and it ranges from 0 to 1. 0 means, looking at it, it means fully transparent. And 1 means not transparent at all. You get? That means it is fully opaque. You get? And when I use maybe 0.4, it means 40% transparency. I can see that our text becomes lighter. Let me actually use, and I think, okay, this is red. Okay, well, this is white. So let me bring it to the red zone. You can actually see that we have the color red here, but sorry. We have the color red, but it is slightly faint. And when I reduce the opacity even further, you see that the red becomes even lighter. But when I increase it to maybe something like 0.9, it becomes darker, but it is not entirely, dark. But when I change it to 1, it becomes like fully opaque. And that means with this transparency, if I add anything to the background, which I will do in a bit, if I put any other thing behind it, you'll be able to see through that, see through this, to see that thing behind it. You get? So it's transparency. This A is the transparency. They call it the alpha channel.
Okay, thank you. I understand now.
Yeah, and the alpha channel is in what they call them. Is it alpha? Is it alpha blending? Yeah. So that's
sorry, it almost seems.
Huh?
Sorry, it almost seems like in PowerPoint where you want to increase the transparency of shape,
even in
color,
Photoshop and so on. Yeah, in Photoshop, I think Photoshop also uses RGB. If you have if you have a background in graphics design, they use this kind of stuff. They also use hue and saturation to combine colors. So that's that. So let's just go into some of the common CSS properties, because so far we've taken a look at some very. Someone wants to ask a question.
Yeah. Sir. Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. I don't know, but I just feel there's a tool called Colorzilla.
Yeah, it's a Chrome extension.
It's a Chrome extension.
Yeah,
I don't know if it can be used for stuff like this.
Yeah, you can. I can actually use Colorzilla to actually
just extract the.
I can pick the color. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just give it to you.
Yeah, you can actually pick it. But I didn't need to emphasize on that. And then I showed you that you can actually, look for tools online to, generate colors for yourself. You get like X color or X color code generator. You can select, you can get that, and you can download that ColorZilla and Chrome extension. So AW3 schools also have their own color picker so that you can use. So in case you are in a situation whereby you need to create an X color and you are finding it hard to do that, you can just pick any of,
Okay, sir.
So you can actually see that they have some, tips here for you. You can easily get some of these colors, but that's fine. But there are color generators online. Most of the times you will not have to be mixing colors when you're not allowed. So, so you don't have to be mixing colors. Yeah. So there are ways around it. Yeah. And the easiest way around it is just to hover on top of the color and pick any color you desire. Just hover on top and pick any color. So that's beauty to pictures. So that's it. So let's go into so far we've taken a look at, we've done some things with CSS, but I have not specifically actually taken a look at some of the properties we are using and explaining those properties to you. And I think it is important for me to explain the properties to you so that you can actually know when I use background color, when I use, certain properties, why I'm using them, and the properties that can be that have alternatives, the ones that don't have alternatives, the ones that are peculiar to certain HTML elements, because some colors are actually peculiar to certain HTML elements. And an example is the color property. Be using the color property, and the color property doesn't show on div. If you have a div, for instance, the color property doesn't do anything on the div other than the fact that the children of the div can just inherit it. The div is on the screen now, but you can't see it. And what I will just do, just to get started with what we want to do tonight, is to set the width of our div, because the div by itself will not have width and height. It will have 0 width and height until you give it the content. And let me show you what that means. Let me just inspect, and our div is already on the page, but we can't see it because by default the width and height of the div is the width and height of the content inside of it. So you can see we have the div. It takes the entire block, but it has 0 height. But you can't see, because even if the width is 2 million pixels, as long as there's no height, the element still doesn't exist as far as the user is concerned. Does that make sense to you guys? So that's what's going on here. So what we are going to do now is, because we already, and I want to just put the div in the middle of the page. So I will just give the body. But let me just keep the div where we're supposed to keep, because I'm trying to go into some specific property values. So I don't want to set anyone that will bring about maybe confusion. So let me set the div. And the div has this 400 width now. You can see that even if it has 400 width, we can still see it. So I have to set the height since there's no content in it. But the moment I add content to it, you actually see that, okay, you'll be able to see it on the screen. You can see it on the screen now, and that's not the plan. It's not intended. So let me just save that. Just set the width and height for it. And I will set the height of, let's make it a perfect square. Let's set the height of it. 400 pixels as well, and you can't still see it, but now it exists in our DOM, because if I hover on top of it, you can actually see that our div actually takes a good piece of real estate here. Yeah, it's about 1 plot, if you know what I mean. So this is the div now. Okay, we now have our div, and just to kind of play around things, the first property I want to talk about tonight, because it's very important we get to know how things work. The first property I want to talk about is the is the background color property. Yeah. And then we've been doing background color all the way. Sorry. We've been doing background color, we're doing things like red and so on. And once I do that, our div is going to be have a color of red. And let me just close this. What is that? Okay, for some reason our div just kind of takes the entire height of the page. So let me see why that is happening. Okay, let me check that out. So I don't set the height. Okay, I think to solve that, let me just give our body our div actually is having a height of 400 pixels. So no idea where this is coming from. It's now looking like we have two divs. Do we have two divs? Did I copy the div somehow? We don't have two divs, we have just one. So let me try and, okay. Did something go wrong? Can you see that all of a sudden it just kind of became small? What is happening? Let me reload the page again to see. Are we safe? This is the 400 pixel div. Maybe I just have to, let me just kind of stop live server and start it again to see if so. So this is what it should look like. I don't know why it's just spanning across the entire screen. Okay, let me check why that is happening. If that doesn't happen, then and if we don't find out what's happening, I just have to.
The div is an activist for freedom rights.
Okay, for some reasons, you see what is happening. Okay, I think there probably is an extension on this page that is doing this to the, that is doing this to you. But let me just leave that out. So this is our div. So I think there's an extension that is creating an extra div on the page. Do you get the point? Like there's an extension on the page, and I don't know where that is coming from. Like an extension that is creating an extra div. So you can see that we have one div here. There's another div. Can you see that? Hello?
Yes, sir.
And there's another one. So it's more like we have three divs now. Can you see? So it's probably one of the extensions I have installed. So you can see that we have this particular element now. Super developer 111. What's that where that coming from? Let me. That's crazy.
So the extension has a diva. Built diva.
Huh?
I said the extension has an inbuilt diva.
Yeah, it just generates a div for me. I don't know why it is generating a div on my page without my consent. So you can see that this is the div we created. This is our div, but somehow we now have some extra div being generated. So I think it's one of the Chrome extensions I have installed probably. It might be this Grammarly or whatever stuff. The way they work, most of these extensions, the way they work is that, okay, I think to solve this problem, let me switch to another browser, please. I'll just switch to Brave. So please, can somebody check YouTube? Somebody checking. Okay, I don't think we should face that issue anymore.
And it is recording, sir.
Okay, thank you. And if we face that issue anymore, what would anybody just recommend that we do? Because whether I like it or not, that extension probably is useful. So that means it's creating a very big, and this is one of the problems you might face when you actually create applications that people use in real life, and then somebody can have this kind of extension and you are styling a div, like using a generic rule set like that, and the thing is creating an extra element for your users. You get, and basically that is nothing from your code. It's just like a class from something that the user has installed on their device, on their browser, and it's clashing with what you've written. So how do you solve that kind of problem if you were the developer? Hello? Interview questions. Okay, you can see that it doesn't do that anymore. So it's that extension on Chrome. Hello.
Yes, sir, we can see it.
I said, how would you solve that problem as a developer? You won't tell your user to change their browser. Nobody wants to answer.
I think you make your code compatible with, or you have to build into the code.
Okay, build into the code what exactly, sir?
Allowances, if that's what I'll call it or something, that allows it to interact in an unobtrusive manner, or what they call it.
Okay, so I think
almost like they can coexist.
Okay, yeah, and the way to actually manage that is by setting a more specific selector to your own elements to ensure that at least use it's a specific selector that even if they have a div, you don't use generic styles that it will now pick their own div and begin to style it. You get the point.
Okay.
Okay. So this is our div now. We are going to do a couple of things with this div of ours. So one of the first things we want to do is, talk about the background property. Yeah. So the background property we are talking about is going to be, is going to be not this full background, not this background color. So there's something such as background, and this is a shorthand property that we don't necessarily have to use background image. You see that it still works. Yeah. And the reason is because with this background, property that we are using, you can actually you can combine more than one background property inside the background, property, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a bit. So because when we do background color, that means we are indicating that what we want to add is a background color. And there's also something such as background image. Yeah, we have background image that takes a URL, and the URL is going to take a string, and that could be the link to any image on the internet. So let's just pick nice. You get, so I will just copy any of course. Sorry, let me just open this. I'll just open it and then copy the URL. So I'll just copy this, copy image address. Then when I copy image address, I come here and paste it inside of here. Then when I save it, our image should be that background. Do you get the point? This one is long sharp. Okay, so you get the point now. So instead of using background color, you can use background image. And you can, the good thing is that you can actually combine if you have a PNG background image, and let me just look for a PNG background image. So we have a background, sorry, star PNG image. I didn't spell that correctly, but it's fine. So I want a star with a transparent background. So I'm just going to copy the star, and then when I copy, let's see if that's the actual image, because sometimes the image itself might not be transparent. So let's just kind of paste that inside of here. No, I won't be doing this. Let me just delete this and paste the new one I just copied and save it. So let's see what that will look like. So you can see that we have, and it is not a transparent image of obviously. So let me just go and go to one of those places where we get free transparent images, because the fact that you have this background means it just tricked us. It's not a transparent image. So free. the stock images. So I'll just go to PNG tree and then what we can do is I'll just undo this for an original transparent image. So let's take a look at this. Then taking a look at this, I'll just copy the image link to ensure that we have a PNG image. And PNG stands for Portable Network Graphics. Okay.
Can you say that again? PNG stands for
Portable Network Graphics. So if this doesn't work, I think I'll just have to go to what's it called? Pixabay. Yeah. Why can't I get a transparent image? Okay, I think I actually have an image on my computer that I can use. So let me just stop trying to get this other image. But let me just give one last try to Pixabay and see if Pixabay is where you can get free stock images online. Yeah. And they are free. Nobody will hold you for using the images, but just that I think you have to give attribution to the original owner of the image. So let's just try and get some vector images. So vector graphics. Yeah. So vector graphics, and I'm going to say star. And I want one with a transparent background because I want to be able to illustrate the idea of what's it called. So let me just copy this image, copy image address. So anytime you need any free image, just come to Pixabay. You get them free images. So let me just paste it and save. So when we come back here, we should see that our image is on our page. Then you can now combine this with background color. Let's do a background color of red and see how that looks. You can see that we are now using the image and the background color together. Do you guys get that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then in this case, you can actually see that our image is, running to one side. So there's something called background size. Then you can use it. You can say when you set it to auto, it kind of automatically renders the image based on the size, original size of the image. If you set it to cover, it kind of just stretches the image so that it can fill your entire, the entire space for the element you are trying to add that background to. And when you set it to contain, it kind of retains the original aspect ratio of the image. That is, it retains the size of the image. You get, and then you can also use, I think you can use some numerical values for this as well. But in the meantime, just keep in mind cover, contain and auto. And then you can see that now we're having the background repeat itself. And just to make sure you see that, I will just set the height of this div to 800 pixels so that you can see that the background is actually repeating itself across, the div. And then the way you can deal with that is by using background repeat. And background repeat can, you can use these values, repeat across the y-axis, repeat across the x-axis. You can set it to repeat and you can set it to no repeat. When you set it to no repeat, it is just going to render it once and it won't repeat it like it was doing before. So let me set this back to 400 pixels and then save it. Then I think we also have background positioning. And these are the things that at your own time you might just have to look at. So I can keep it at the top, something such as top. Then you can, let me make this stuff a little bit bigger. Let me make it 600 in such a way that, it's just 6,000. Wow, that's a lot of real estate. So that's a lot of real estate. So when I set it to the top, it keeps the background at the top. Then I can set it to the bottom. It takes it to the bottom. I can set it to center. It takes it to the center. Keeps it at the center. And I can also set, I think you can set it across the X and Y axis as well. So you can just have to look at that at your own time. So I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about each one of these properties. So that's the background, property. And there's also a shorthand form for the background, background property, which I'm going to be talking about in a bit. So instead of doing background, position, background, which is what I do most of the time, you can just combine all of these stuffs. And let me just comment this out. You can combine all of these stuffs into one full background, into just background. Then here you can use you know, you can set the URL like we did here, and then I think I just have to, you know, look up that a little bit, maybe from somewhere on Google. So you can see that we still have a background, but all the shorthand properties gone. So hold on, let me just try and get the syntax for combining this whole thing. Yeah. So let's just check shorthand. So let's get the shorthand background property. So okay, so to get the shorthand background property, we just, you know, you instead of combining this background, that you can actually combine everything here like this. So I think we can also add a background image like this. So add a red background image. Yeah, when we save that, so instead of doing background color, background image, you can see that we're getting the same thing. Okay, then you can set the background repeat to no repeat, and I don't prefer this in any way, so you can say no repeat. Yeah, so when you set no repeat, it just kind of, it doesn't repeat it, because, you know, remember initially, if we don't set this no repeat, it will by default repeat the background, and the way we'll find out is by increasing the width of this element of ours to, let's say, like 600 pixels, and let's increase the width and whatever to 600. So I think we can just, so I think it shouldn't be so much complexity. So let's just say cover. That, I think that's an invalid value. So let's set no repeat. So let's set top and save. So it kind of just renders. So let's just keep looking at the shorthand property. So no repeat. So we can put it at the right top corner. So it's just more like you doing the same thing we did before, but now you are combining it to just one, what's it called? And I think we should be, I'm not sure if it's possible to set the background size as such. So use shorthand property to set background properties in one declaration. So I want to know if you can set the size for contain. It's actually not working. So for some reason that doesn't work. So but this actually helps you set all of these things we did up here in just one command. So you might just have to look up this maybe at your own free time, but I don't always use this. I just declare all my background properties like this. Yeah. And let me just bring back the other one, so I comment it out, and then let's keep this one we're using before. I prefer this. So does that make sense to you guys?
Yes, sir.
Yeah? Does that make sense? Hello?
Take time to digest, but it makes sense.
Okay, like, do I need to pause a little bit on the background stuff, or should proceed? Hello, where's everybody? Like, people have slept too. That's what I always say.
Yeah.
Hey,
Sorry. Proceed. You can proceed.
hey. Okay, so, but is the background stuff clear, please? If it is not clear, there's no need for us to rush. You get it? There's no need to rush. Because if I explain and we rush, tomorrow we still have to come back. When I give you a project, we have to start going over. So if it is not clear, we don't have to cover 20 properties this night. Okay, when there's a replay though, you can always go back to, but if it is not clear while I explain it now, maybe it might not be clear when you watch the replay. Yeah. So, but that's fine. So we can combine all of this. So we've been using background color so far. So now I told you we can now use images for our background. And I used an image that has a transparent background, so that I can show you how you can use color and background image together, background color and image together. That makes sense. Then I also told you that you can change the size of your background to either cover, contain, or auto. Then you can repeat your background or decide not to repeat it. You know. Then we can also set our background position to either the top. You know, we can set it to the top, that is it is more towards the top, and you can also set value for the top. Maybe you want it to be, I think that's possible too. Maybe you want it to be 10%. You want it to offset 10% from the top. So that way, no, that doesn't work. And then let me just do right. Just to be sure. Sorry. I don't know if I need to add pixels to that. Okay, you can see that it's offset 10 pixels from the top, and let me just do 100 so that to be clear. 100 pixels from the top and 100 pixels from the right. So when you have maybe this kind of thing and you want to set it to maybe like the bottom left corner or something like that, you can use this background position property to handle that. And let me just comment this out as well, and then just to keep it there for you guys to look at when you start looking at the code. But for now, I think what we just need to do is focus on the center. Yeah, put it in the center for now. So that's that about the background. So there's another kind of background we can add in CSS, and I will create another div now. So let me call this div, let me give it a class name of background properties. So what we are putting basically are background properties on this div. So just to show you how that works, then I'll, instead of doing div, I'll just give this use a class selector instead. So now we are going to create another div. Yeah, and I think I should just make this div a little smaller so that we can be able to put other divs around it. So let's make it 200, and let's make this 200 as well. So when I save it, it becomes smaller, but you can see that it is still contained inside the inside of the div. And if I make this cover, it won't contain it. It will just spill out. You can't see the four edges of the image anymore. The background image, it kind of just spills out of the area where we gave to it. And if I do auto, it will take the original size of that image, and we don't get to see the full image anymore, because we are asking it to take as much space as it needs to keep its aspect ratio. So but for now, let's do contain so that we can see the entire image inside of our div. So we create another div, and the other property I want to show you is the gradient property. So there's another way of setting your background color, and that's by using a gradient color instead of a normal color. So we are going to we're going to kind of copy this downward, and I use Shift and Alt to copy things in VS Code. When you press Shift and Alt then down, it copies that same line downwards. So I just need that now. I just said background gradient. So background gradient is going to sorry, I just have to check. Okay, the YouTube is still okay. Background gradient is going to have what's it called? I don't know what if you guys understand what gradient means. Let me just show you an example of what gradients are. So this is a gradient, kind of gradient is a special kind of image that you create by just offsetting colors and doing some special things with color. So we have different types of gradient. So when you see a color like this, it's actually a gradient color. So this is another gradient color, and this, I think this is a UI gradient generator or something like that you can use, and it's going from this color to this color. I think we should just stay here in a bit. So let us copy the same width and height, and let me remove this color property because we're not using it anymore. Let me retain the width and height, and I did one what's it called, background properties. Okay, what we call the second class is not background. I think I used background instead of background. Let me correct that, both in the HTML as well, and let me correct this as well. So let me save, and let me put the G back here too. Okay, everything is fine. So I'll just copy the width and height and put it on this other div as well, so that it can have the same size and dimension. But remember, that one does not have any content. So just to make sure that it is there, let's put a color of yellow, so you can see that it is there. I save with Ctrl+S. Background properties. Are you sure I spelled the class name correctly? Let me copy the class name and paste it in HTML just to be sure that it's properly spelled. Okay.
It was supposed to be gradient.
Okay, gradient, right?
Yes.
Thank you, Ariel. So let me save it. but I still can't find the background gradient. Let me copy it once more. Sometimes you can have issues with your class name like that, and for some reasons it doesn't just display in your HTML code. So for some reason, let's just inspect and see what's happening. But our class name is correct, I believe. Yeah. Our class name is correct, and let's just print this out and kind of check out. So this is second div. It's actually there. Why is it not displaying? Hold on, let me do some set index. Strange behaviors or it's actually there, right? From inspecting it, you can see that the div is there, but for some reasons, or maybe I didn't. Oh, can you see what the problem is? Instead of background color, I set color to yellow, so that's why the problem is there. You get, and color is no valid way to set background color yet, so that's the problem. So instead of background color, I don't want to be background. Let's just set the background property. And then the kind of background we want to use is the linear gradient background. Yeah. So the way you write linear gradient, you know what I mean by gradient, right? Or do I need to explain it more? Are you guys familiar with the word gradient?
Yes. No, you showed an example.
Okay, this is what a gradient looks like. So let me now go to the UI gradient. So let me just go to the CSS gradient and so these are all gradient generators, because gradient is also as complicated as, you know, having what's it called CSS, CSS colors. So you have to combine them as such, but the effect they give is actually very nice. So you can see that this is a linear gradient now, and it's you can see when you have the same color, but you just have you have one color on the left and it just slightly fades into another color by the right. This is, you know, this is a linear gradient. We have radial gradient as well. You get the point. So this is radial gradient. This is radial gradient. Radial gradient runs from the center to, you know, it spans out that other color from the center and just, you know, flashes out and fades into the other color. So this is what a gradient is like. You guys get that?
Yes, sir.
So let's just keep these stuff around, so because we might need them when we want to generate nice gradients, because at the moment I might be lacking gradient inspiration. So the way you write linear gradient is do linear and you do gradient. I can see VS Code is already suggesting to us. So the first parameter you take is the direction you want to go. You want to go from left to right or from right to left. Then the second parameter the other parameter should now be the color you are trying to go from. Okay, let's say I want to go from blue to light blue. You get. So the direction we want to go from is from left to right here. We want to go from left to right. Yeah, that's correct. So if we save this, okay, now that doesn't look good. So the syntax actually is, the first parameter is the direction, then the second one is, so for now let me just keep the direction out, then we'll look at that later. Let's just be sure that the stuff is working. So but for some reasons it doesn't work. So okay, for some reasons I think that doesn't. Let me let me get this this already generated.
You didn't define the color in your code.
I didn't
The
watch.
color was not defined in your code. The background color.
No, I don't have to use background color. It doesn't have to background color.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, so let me take a look at this. So linear gradient, let me just get this. So okay, this one is radial actually. So the one I want to look at is a linear gradient. So so it actually goes from left to right. So let me just look at the code here and then okay, that's what we did now. We did to right bar. So this should automatically work, except if it's a browser compatibility issue. So this should work. I think that's what we wrote before. That's what we wrote. We did to right, then this should work. So if it doesn't work, that means something is will be a browser compatibility issue, because just to be sure, this is what I got from that particular site. Then it is background. And then when I save it, okay, that works. But it's the exact same syntax. Okay, the possibility is probably the fact that maybe it doesn't accept color keywords. Sorry. So let me use this. And let's go from RGB blah 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 to this and see if that will solve the problem for us. So for some reasons it doesn't work. Let's try Xcodes. So let's go from 0 black to oh, I think I know what I missed. Jesus, it's not the red color. I missed a comma here, so that's the problem. You get it? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so there's supposed to be a comma between this color and every subsequent color you want to add, so you can still decide to add green, and you can decide to add black, and it will be getting ugly as you add more colors basically. But you just have to know that you have to use this you have to use this with caution. So I think we can also go to left. Yeah, see, we are going to left now. We can go to, I believe, bottom. So it goes from top to bottom, and we can also go to top. So from bottom to top, you get it. So that's linear gradient. But I think the two colors we had initially was actually finer. So let's copy, let's stick to the color they gave us from this linear gradient generator set. So this being the first color, this one being the first color. So we've copied that. So let's keep that in our color bank. Is that what I copied? I copied this color and it's pasting on that color entirely. Probably a problem with their own code. So let me just write out the color. Let me write OOCC. Yeah. And then the second one is 333 1 2 3 4 9 9. Yeah. So that's it. So we have that color now. So we have a nice gradient on our on our div. So does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Okay. So don't forget the comma. If you forget the comma, it won't work. And it's one of those things when I tell you that the computer is actually very dumb. It's just like because of one comma, our code won't work. So that's fine. So this is linear gradient. So, and let me just add background linear gradient to this, because we are going to look at radial gradient as well now. So let me just do linear gradient. And I believe that you guys must have been thinking of the really cool things you can actually do with this now, but I'm the only one thinking about it.
Yes.
You're already
We're trying to wrap our head around this.
Okay, that's fine. So, and you know that you having this gradient doesn't stop you from actually putting content inside your div, like putting H1 or H2. And let me actually do that. Doesn't stop you. You get, doesn't stop you from putting your linear gradient. And what we can just do is just change the color of what's in the div to color of white. And let me just deal with the font family on the body so that we can have a nice font family. I don't like this. So let's use this Sergio UI. So I think this one is better. Then inside of the body, let's just do text align everything to center so that everything other thing can inherit it center. So font size, let me make the font size smaller. to maybe a small. Okay, I think that's fine. Okay, sorry. No, let me not put that here. So let me just put that on the H2 element. So let me just say H2. Okay, I think that's redundant, but let me just, I don't want to use display flex for this thing because I don't want to start talking about flex boxes. What I want to do is to make sure that whatever I talk about, in this class is what we actually be dealing with. So what I wanted to do is to just make all of the divs have a display of flex. Yeah. And let me just keep that. Then when we talk about flex, that doesn't stop us from talking about flex. Justify content, remember, is the horizontal with alignment. Then align items is the vertical alignment center. So that will keep our text in the middle of the div. So that's what I wanted to do. But that's fine. So you don't have to think about it too much. We'll still talk about it much later. So we want to do the radial background and radial gradient. So let's do radial. So all you just need to do is to do radial. Oh, I said that too. Okay, we created a new div, right? So let me copy this linear gradient and paste it inside this second div and call this one radial gradient. And radial actually means it's pertaining to radius. That means it is circular, it is not linear like this one. So let's just add our radial. Sorry if I'm spelling radial correctly. Okay, I'll just copy this same rule set and bring it down. And then instead of linear gradient, I'll add radial gradient and paste it here and then save it. So that should be fine. So instead of linear here, I'm going to add radial and save, but that shouldn't take any effect because radial gradient actually has a slightly different syntax. Because that one, we don't necessarily, there's only one position it can go to. We just have to specify the colors. Yeah, I believe we don't have to do any extra thing. So you can see that the color goes from middle to the edges of the box, not from left to right or top to bottom as we did in our, what's it called? In our linear gradient. Do you guys understand that?
You.
Yes, so if you don't specify the direction, it's just going to automatically
Yeah, the
off
idea
from
of
it.
radial is just that you want it to just, and I think for linear gradient, if you don't specify the direction, it just should automatically, go from top to bottom without specifying the direction. But for radial, the idea of radial is that it goes from the middle of the circle to the edges of the circle. Yeah, I believe. You get it?
Okay. Okay.
So radial has to do with a circle, while linear has to do with just a straight. Linear is straight now, you get. Radial is circle. Pertaining to radius, I believe.
Okay.
Yes, so let me just add a margin just to separate them from one another. So let me add a margin of 5 pixels. So not 50. Let's say 5 pixels. That should be enough to keep them apart from each other. So there's another one called linear repeat and radial repeat. So I'm just going to add that as well to our. So there's something such as linear repeat. Linear repeat, and don't mind my class name being too long. So we have linear repeat, and then what we can do is just the exact same way we wrote linear gradient. So linear repeat, we add linear repeat, and then we'll come down here. The background properties we had, okay, so that will be down here. So do dot, sorry, and we're using a class name selector, so let's just implement that. And then what we'll do is we just copy the width and height. And then okay, so that's that one is here now. So we'll copy the width and height, and then we set our background. Okay, repeating linear gradient. Yeah, that's what we're looking for. So it doesn't have any whatever value now. So let's still go from this color to the, or let's pick a different color from here. So let's just generate a whole new color entirely. And there are always tools like this online for you to be able to just solve certain complex problems, so that you don't have to start having to write most of all these things, 5, 6, the FF560. Is that even complete? Okay, FF5 F60. Yeah. Then the hash sign behind it. Then we are going to FFC 371. Yeah. So let's go back to our document now. So I think our stuff is actually very small, so it's very hard to see what is going on. So let me increase the, and first of all, let's go from left to right. So I'll increase. Sorry. So what I'll do is I'll increase the width to like about 600. So you can't see much of a difference now, because I think I just have to add more stuff to it. So to top. I have to add more colors to this, just to show you what is going on for you. So if we add let's say so the idea is that it should repeat infinitely as long as the what's it called. And let me just make this have a width of 100 pixels. 100%. Okay, I believe it is repeating, or is it not repeating? No, it's just displaying them once, right? It's not actually repeating it. Or is it repeating it?
No. No, it's not repeating it. They're just aligned one after the other.
Okay. I think we have to make that happen. I think one of the things that is happening is probably, let me reduce the colors I'm using. So I think I have to now at this point specify the width of each one of them. So I think let me do here, let me say 5 pixels. So okay, now I think it's repeating now. So initially it's only going as far as it can go, but at the moment I want to reduce how far it can go. So instead of doing this, let me copy this particular color. So let me make this 1.5. So you can see that it's actually repeating now. So I think let me
Yes, sir.
Can you see it?
Yes, it's repeating
So it keeps repeating. Yeah. So let's make it 2. So we just set the offset of how far we want each one to spread. So let's make this one spread as much as 20 pixels and this one spread as much as 30 pixels. Then afterwards, it will have to repeat again. So that's what is happening here. Do you get it?
Yeah.
Does it make sense to you guys? So let me reduce the width back to 200%. So that is what is happening here. And this actually looks very fine. So other than the linear repeat, we also have radial repeats, and I'm going to just copy this and paste it downwards. So we're going to say radial repeat, and this is going to be radial. Does somebody want to ask a question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can transparency work for this one, like alpha, the alpha attribute?
Except if you have to set the transparency of each one of these colors, like that should work. You can make your color as transparent as you want. That's your choice. You see that color is more transparent now, but you can't necessarily make the gradient itself transparent. I don't think that's possible. You get it?
Okay.
You understand what I mean by that, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the radial repeats. But if you want to put this on top of something else, there's another way you can just do it. Maybe you want to have this kind of background on top of something else. You can add transparency. So that's a kind of a more advanced CSS operation, but it's possible. So we'll do background. Jesus, my neck. Background. Are you guys overwhelmed?
No.
You are not overwhelmed. Wow, I like that.
I am. I am.
Okay.
I'm totally lost because of my network.
Are you serious? Hey,
So I'm
don't
just
worry.
hoping to watch the video again.
Yeah, sorry about that. Repeating a radial gradient. See, they said last class will be fine. Don't worry. Thank God there's a replay. And please, somebody should check. So you can see the radial one now. And I think let's just use a different color just to make it look nicer and distinct from this other one. So the color we're using is 16BFFD. Then we are going towards CB3066. And I think we've spent a good number of time on this gradient, but I think it's a very powerful tool for you to be able to do nice things that makes you happy in the meantime until so I think that's about linear. And there's another kind of gradient which I'm almost forgetting. That's the conic gradient. So this one actually doesn't take the shape of a circle, it takes the shape of a cone. Yeah, so it's also very similar in terms of how it works. So all we just do is we just go from one color to the other as usual. Just copy and paste this, and then we go from we'll do conic gradient. So we just go from one color to the other. Let's just go from light pink. We go from light pink to let's go from blue to gray. So you can see the conic gradient here. So that's what it looks like. And let's not make this one look inferior in terms of having a nice color. So let's just get this color and add there instead. So the color, the syntax is So the syntax is A80077. And this should actually show you that you don't have to start coming up with the X code for these colors. You can always look them up online to get your own the X code that you intend to work for you by using a color picker tool or something. Like this one just generates nice gradients, and there are always tools like that online. So this is a conic gradient tool per se. And I want to make all of the backgrounds white. So instead of putting this white color on just the linear gradient and the radial gradient, let me just remove it from these two, and let's have them inherited from the div. So let's put it here, and everything is now white. So does that make sense to you guys? So I think I've been able to cover background images, background color, background repeat, background size, and background position. Yeah. So the next thing I would want us to cover, and I think we still have how many minutes? We have about we have this 21. We have like 9 minutes. So I think maybe we should just stop here tonight. Yeah. And then this is the point where you get to ask your questions. So please ask your questions. I know like we've done a lot of things tonight. So just for you guys to be, to be sure that we are on the same. So just for me to be sure that we're on the same page rather. So you can ask your questions now. So that I can just quickly go over on some couple of things. I don't want to, because the next thing we would have gone to is the idea of borders. Because the border is also a very powerful tool in CSS, because you can do some very amazing things with it, because you can do border. You can do border top left radius, something like that. You can do 20 pixels. You can do something. Just watch this first element. So this is what we're going to cover next. So for this one, you can see how this one actually has a curved edge. So that's what we'll be looking at next. But in the meantime, I think we should just rest for tonight. And let me copy the same thing and make the border right. That was the element I was actually targeting.
Sir, I want to ask a question. Okay, so I know I said I'm lost because of my network. I've been going on and off. Network has been really bad. But from the div, there was a place you put margin of 5 pixels. Is it for the word?
You just know it's for
the hello word.
We have more than one div. This is a div, this is a div, this is a div. So the idea is to create this space in between each one, because without that margin, they will just be joined together. You can't see.
Okay.
So we just wanted to space them out.
Okay. Right. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So any other question?
And sorry, sir, the align items center, justify content center.
Let me remove these two guys so that we can know where we are starting from tomorrow. Sorry, align item center. Okay, you mean this one for the div?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Let me just show you now. Just watch the movement of this text from the along the vertical axis and along the horizontal axis. So you don't do you can see now that aligning it to the right, aligns it right horizontally.
Yes.
If I do and right is actually left in this context for some reasons. No. That doesn't work. So I was just about saying that for flex boxes, you don't do left right. It's either you do flex start like this, that is the left, or you do flex end, which will take it to the other side. You get. But you can see that the movement is across the horizontal axis, the x-axis, because that's how CSS puts it. So when we do center, put it at the center along the horizontal axis. That is justify content, provided your flex direction, which is this flex direction, has not been changed to column. Because the moment you change your flex direction to column, your horizontal axis becomes your vertical axis, and your vertical axis becomes your horizontal axis. So I will do the same thing on justify content I just did now. Flex start. And you see that instead of aligning it across the horizontal axis, if you align it across the vertical axis, flex end, then flex start aligns it across to the top of the vertical axis. So you can see that justify content is now working across the vertical axis because I changed the flex direction. But by default, the flex direction is a row, not a column. So when I do justify content center, it aligns it to the center horizontally. So align items aligns it. If I do flex start, it aligns it vertically. So this will be to the top. You can get all of them are now at the top because it's
center in the top. Okay.
Yeah. So we can do flex end, which we align them to the bottom. You can see. So this align item goes across the vertical axis by default, while justified content goes across the horizontal axis by default.
Okay.
So I want to put both of them at the center. So yeah, to be center vertically, then to be centralized horizontally too. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So any other question? Okay. Okay. Okay, I think Manu is actually playing now. So for those of you who like to, so Henry is here actually. So Henry is one of the very first students I started taking. That was at the beginning of 2020. So he will be one of the people that will be taking you on the tutorial sessions actually. So if you have any difficulty or you have any extra questions, so just revert to them, so they will be able to help you. There are a couple of them. I don't know if the others are on Discord, but you know, Henry is the only one I can find now. So for the body as well, you know, talking about flex boxes now. So when I add a display of flex to the body, what do you think is going to happen? Can somebody guess that?
So repeat the question, please.
If I add a display of flex to the body, I've added it now, but I've not saved it. What do you think will happen to our page?
I think it's going to push it to the middle,
No.
to the center.
No. So what's going to happen is it is going to arrange everything side by side as against stacking them on top of each other. So you can see now. So if you had this property in your arsenal, that day you were doing the Thomas Common assignments, you would have just used this trick to solve that header problem. You get the problem, endpoint, to put the image on the right and the other one on the left. You would have just put the two of them inside one container, then put a display of flex. You get. So, but we'll talk more on flexbox multiply. I just wanted to water your mouth. That's why I did that. But the flexbox is actually a very powerful tool. And then there's another, property similar and more recent than flexbox. It is called grid. But we'll look at all of those later. So that's fine. So you guys can, have a wonderful evening. I think it's been a wonderful time tonight, and I think there's a lot to learn from this particular class, and then you can begin to build on that. You can begin to do some amazing stuff, and I will actually I will create an assignment around this stuff. So I would just want you to follow through with them and try to finish them up. So I don't know if that makes sense for you guys.
Yes, it does.
Okay, but so far, like, even if you had network problems or so, but I think everything is clear enough, like quite clear, even if it's not clear enough, because clear enough is such a strong word. Triumph, it won't be hard actually, to be easy. You have to be positive, and as a matter of fact, I just feel like let's pray together tonight before we call it evening. So let's pray. Father, in Jesus' name, we thank you. I know there's a Muslim here. No apologies. Father, in Jesus' name, we thank you for the success of this class so far. It is not of our power. It is not of our own wisdom or understanding that we're able to come this far. We ask that you keep taking us, you keep leading us through. You give us quickened understanding, and you grant our teachers here and there utterances both in the tutorial sessions and in the actual class sessions. Lord, we ask that this will not be an effort in futility, that each and every one of us will be living this program fruitful in the name of Jesus. Thank you, Father, for you've heard us. We're praying nice to you in Jesus' name. So have a wonderful evening, guys. Yeah, have a wonderful evening.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, and I'm going to take